Welcome back to Broken Bow Tapes. I'm John P. Williams. Leasburg, Missouri. It's a little town in Crawford County, just off I-44. Blink and you might miss it. But in 1958, a young John Hartford made his way to Leasburg with a tape recorder. I'm awfully glad he did. Like a lot of fiddlers, I've heard people say, I sure wish I'd taken a tape recorder over to old so-and-so's house. The trouble is, by the time you realize you should have, it's usually too late. John Hartford figured that out while he was still a teenager. For several years, Hartford had been making trips from St. Louis to visit older Missouri fiddlers, carrying what Howard Marshall described as the schoolhouse Wollensak recorder. Among those fiddlers were Gene Goforth, Cleo Persinger, Ed Tharp, and a man named Walter Alexander. Mr. Alexander lived around Leasburg, and sometime in 1958, Hartford turned that recorder on.
That I had never heard before. She said it was an awful good square dance.
Was that the one I said it was in the...
I started digging into Mr. Alexander thinking I was going to find another good fiddle story. Instead, I found another mystery. Walter Alexander was born in 1890, and he died in 1974. He lived in Crawford County, Missouri, and that's about where the paper trail starts getting thin. There are no commercial recordings. There is very little biographical information. Not much in the way of photographs or newspaper stories. John Hartford hadn't shown up with a tape recorder. Walter Alexander might have disappeared almost completely from the historical record. But he didn't, because we can still hear him. And, for a fiddler, that's a pretty good biography. The first thing that struck me when I listened to Walter was how much he reminded me of Roy Wooliver. Not because they played exactly alike, they didn't, but there is something very similar in the way they approach the fiddle. It's raw, it's unabashed, and the tune always comes first. Neither one sounds particularly interested in polishing things up for somebody else's approval, and like I mentioned to a friend yesterday, tunes have some dirt under their fingernails. They're not trying to demonstrate how much they know. They're playing the tune, and they're playing it like somebody might be dancing. That's an important distinction. A lot of us who came along later learned to listen to old-time music as something that needed to be preserved. Walter and Roy weren't preserving anything. They were just playing. And that's something else I really like about Mr. Alexander. His repertoire doesn't fit neatly into the little boxes we built around old-time music. You'll hear the local stuff, you'll hear the breakdowns, you'll hear tunes that traveled a long way before they ever made it to Missouri. And that's the way it was. These fiddlers weren't sitting around worrying about whether something qualified as traditional. If it was a good tune, they played it. If somebody brought a new one to town, they learned it. If the dancers liked it, it stayed. The Missouri repertoire associated with Walter Alexander includes tunes like Skin Town, Knockin' at Your Door, Lord Nelson's Hornpipe, and Black River. That's a pretty good reminder that the old-time fiddler's repertoire was often a whole lot bigger than the label we put on it later.
You remember this?
That's one of the things I love about these old recordings. You start out listening for the tune, then you start listening for the fiddler. Then, if you listen long enough, you start hearing the world he came from. Mr. Alexander wasn't trying to sound old, he was just sounding like Walter Alexander. And that's the part we can't recreate. We can learn his tunes, we could spend hours trying to figure out what he was doing with his bow arm, but we can't go back to Leasburg in 1958. We can't sit in the room, we can't hear the conversation before the tape started rolling, we can't hear what Walter played when John Hartford wasn't there. We only have what made it onto the tape. And that's why I'm grateful that John Hartford carried that recorder down those roads.
I've heard that, but I can't think of the name. Oh, yeah, Alabama Bound.
Hartford wasn't looking for celebrities, he was looking for fiddlers. He understood that the best fiddler in a county might never leave that county. He might never make a record. He might never make it to play on the radio. He might never win a contest. He might just be the guy everybody wanted at the dance. And when that man was gone, so was the music, unless somebody remembered to press record. That's Walter Alexander, a name that doesn't show up very often, a fiddler who left almost nothing behind on paper. But listen to this.
Play three parts of that.
Is that it?
Yeah.
There he is. That's the part that matters. I'm not a music historian. I'm just a fiddler, a collector, somebody who has spent a lot of time listening to old recordings and wondering about the people on the other side of the microphone. And the more I listen to Walter Alexander, the more I think about Roy Wooliver, Gene Goforth, and all the other Missouri fiddlers whose names we may never know. There had to be hundreds of them. People who played this music in kitchens, schoolhouses, front rooms, barns, and dance halls. People who never imagined that somebody 70 years later would still be listening. Walter Alexander just happened to be one of the lucky ones. John Hartford found him, and he pressed record. So this one is for Walter Alexander, Leesburg, Missouri, 1890 to 1974. We hardly know anything about his life. We probably never will. But we have his tunes, and for now, that's enough. Thanks for spending a little time with me. I'm John P. Williams, and until next time, there's always another tape waiting on the shelf. Be sure to check the show notes where you'll find free downloads of the recordings mentioned in this episode.